I'm ready.
Okay.
Let's roll.
Good evening. This is the Wednesday, November 13th, 2024 meeting of the Finance Committee, starting uncharacteristically at 6:30 PM as opposed to 7 PM. We're in the Public Safety Complex, and there's also a Zoom link for those that may want to join us that way. We have what appears to be a short agenda, but there's some longevity in some of the agenda items. So we're going to move right along and want to start by welcoming our newest member to the Finance Committee, Jeff Wenzel, who was appointed last evening, sworn in today. So can take official role in tonight's votes and discussions, and we welcome you, Jeff, and look forward to working with you. I think I'd like to go around the room just briefly, just on the event. I think you introduced yourself to everybody as they came in, but maybe one more time. Ben?
Jeff, Ben Mitchell, nice to meet you.
Tony Dominic.
Jeremy Richard.
Mark Love. We met last night, too.
Yes, yes. But you do me anyways.
Yes. Glad to have you aboard. So the next article or item on our agenda are to review the articles that are going to be presented at the special town meeting on Monday, November 18th. They've all been sent to you. Heather is joining us by way of Zoom link. And in Washington, D.C., there's no truth to the fact that she had lunch with President Biden and President-elect Trump, but she is there. And she's going to walk us through these particular articles, and what I'm going to do at some particular point when we're ready, I'm going to ask for a vote as they appear. There's been occasion where we've read all of these, and there's no way I'm reading the zoning article bylaw to everybody.
Thank
so,
you. Second.
So Heather, you're up. Go ahead.
It is a short meeting, Mark, so no time to read all of that.
Okay, good.
Okay, so the first article we had was the lease at Lakes Pond parking lot, and as I mentioned last night, the select board meeting, more information has come to light since this article was placed on the warrant, particularly as relates to Article 97 that protects this land and would require going through the act of a special act of legislation in order to be able to lease it. So with that being said, I believe it's the town's intent to pass over this article.
So with that, I don't think we need to take a step to pass on the pass. So we'll pass. So Article 2, having to do with the establishment of an MS4 enterprise fund, more commonly referred to as a stormwater enterprise fund. So Heather, go ahead.
Sure. So this is something we've been talking about for a little while now, specifically as relates to stormwater. So stormwater in the MS4 stands for 4 S's, and I don't know the 4 S's, and I don't know if I'll ever know the 4 S's. But it's stormwater. It's something we've talked about during budget seasons past couple of years. It's an unfunded mandate from the state. It started a number of years ago, and we are in either the 5th or the 6th year of our permit, requiring more and more compliance, more catch basin cleanings, more reporting, more mitigation, everything else. As we saw this past year when we talked about the budget for FY25, there was a great deal of concern about increasing costs just to stay in compliance, to be able to continue to get our permit and stay in good standing with the state. And I don't know if folks remember, but last year the amount was like around 90,000 was what we originally looked at. We got the number down by utilizing more funds from ARPA to offset it. Moving forward, you know, we don't have those one-time funds, and we really need to start thinking about what our permanent solution is for this, whether it's going to be something we're going to absorb within our already very strained operating budget or whether we're gonna look at it a different way. A number of municipalities in Massachusetts have begun looking at it a different way and by using the mechanism of the enterprise fund. So similar to what we have for the water enterprise fund, it essentially is its own entity. The funds coming in are specifically for that purpose and they're expended for that purpose. If there's any money left over at the end of the year, it does not carry forward to free cash, rather carries forward to something called retained earnings, just like the water would, and that would go back into the program. What would happen is we would come up with a mechanism where it would be essentially an assessment on every parcel in town that was improved. So if it's just a plot of woods, then it wouldn't be impacted. If it's something with a driveway or a paved surface or a house, then it would in fact receive an assessment. They did this very similar in Rutland. There's a couple different mechanisms out there. Some towns have looked at it and they've actually gone through the process of hiring an outside consultant, measuring everyone's impervious surface and calculating a fee based on that. Rutland took a very initial elementary approach, which I think is something Travis and I started talking about a little bit more, which is just the idea of getting something on the books where we say, this is our best guess at the estimated expenses for next year. We would need to raise Y dollars in revenue. We would divide it by the number of parcels that are improved in town, and then that would be the annual assessment, and we would mail it out, likely utilizing the light company and their assistance when other bills go out. I know one of the things that came up when we talked about this initially at the select board meeting was that we were going to look at some calculations to see if we can figure out what those initial assessments would look like. And with that, I know Travis is currently trying to put together some estimates using both our consultants and some other metrics, so at least we have some number. I don't have that for you today, but I'm hoping to have something for next week. If this does go forward, what this would mean is that we would still put together an enterprise budget just like we do water. It would go to town meeting, the annual town meeting, and have to be voted on and approved. We'd still have to figure out if we're going to have a separate board for it or whether or not it's going to be something that would be overseen by the select board. If it doesn't pass, that's okay too. It just means that now we're going to have to find those funds within our already constrained budget. And if last year was a $90,000 increase and we still weren't at full reporting and full requirements, then this year's increase is going to be a much higher number that we're going to have to figure out.
We are not at full requirement. How much are we behind, money-wise?
So we're doing pretty, we've been keeping up each year as the requirements get a little bit more as we go further into our permit. But it's hard to say specifically what it is. Every time we get estimates for things, as time passes, costs go up, right? So we had originally, a couple of years ago, Travis and I had talked about looking at firms to come in or contractors to come in and do the catch basin cleaning for us, because as we know, our fleet is becoming more and more aged, and even our catch basin cleaning apparatus,
Which we just bought.
Machine itself is starting to be aging, and we're going to have to replace at some point soon. So we had looked at the cost of potentially hiring out for that, and the hourly cost of that 2 years ago is almost double now what it was 2 years ago. So there's lots of factors that go into this place, but it includes, having to do the regular catch basin cleanings, having to do, the reporting, and having to start doing some repairs and some mitigating.
Didn't we just buy a new catch basin cleaning equipment attachment 2 years ago? I mean, I thought we did.
I thought that was a mower.
No,
we bought an attachment.
We
Ditch
bought an attachment to
Oh.
clean the basins.
Yeah.
The arm?
Yeah.
It might have been the arm for it, but it wasn't the actual catch basin itself. It might have been, to your point, I always think of a vacuum and then all the accessories.
It's the clock.
Yeah.
So with the committee's blessing, typically we have a motion and a second and then discussion. Can we kind of reverse that and have the discussion so that people will be comfortable making the motion? So Heather, I want to follow up on the revenue side. You said it was mentioned at the finance committee, the select board meeting. I agree that the select board raised the point, but in the audience, I was recognized, and I did too. I'm still struggling with where the revenue is coming in order to fund this revenue expense enterprise fund. Now, a minute ago in that same meeting, you said, well, the beauty is we pull the expenses out, which for budget purposes, I think we're all thankful for that. But where's the revenue come to subsidize that? And wouldn't that also then be pulled out of the operating budget as well, so the net effect is zero? Or is there another assessment that's being calculated that's going to be assessed to those affected by the stormwater enterprise fund? I'm lost as to where the revenue's
Yeah.
coming.
So it's the latter, Mark, right? It would be an assessment. The assessment would essentially be to anyone with an improved parcel. I don't believe folks who are, nonprofit or currently may not pay taxes in other ways would be exempt to this. I think it applies to everyone. It's no different than having a water bill, right? So it essentially, if you own a parcel of land in the town of Paxton and it's not just all forest, you're gonna get the assessment. The initial assessment that we would be looking at this, at least for the first year or so, would be the same for everybody. Just because I don't think we have the funding to go out and hire someone to come in and do an assessment and do detailed numbers. But over time, it would have the ability to look more specific. So if you have less impervious surface than someone else, or someone has an extensive parking lot, then maybe they would pay a heavier share.
So my last question is, you talked about it may come in one form or another and report to one body, select board or another. Why wouldn't it be exactly the same as the Water Enterprise Fund? Aren't those elected board positions?
They are elected board positions, but, as we're currently looking at the charter review, that's something that's always a conversation, is what the structure is. So which positions are elected, which are appointed, and which roles do we actually still need as elected? Some communities, actually, the select board serves as the select board and the water board, and the MS4 enterprise board, right? So it's just, I think those are some decisions that would still have to be made. This gives the town the go-ahead to start putting those pieces into position and start figuring out all of those elements before town meeting rolled around in May.
Is there any reason we couldn't incorporate this under the existing water enterprise fund? And, that we already get the bills, we already get that, so it would just be another line item.
So it's different, right? So not everyone has water in town.
Correct, but right now we have a mechanism for appraisals and fees and all that. This is what if I understand what you're saying, this is gonna go across the board. People are gonna get some bill from this enterprise fund. We already have a mechanism set up. We already have a board. We have the oversight. All that already exists today for the water company. Why wouldn't we just put it underneath that?
We could have it under them, the MS4 enterprise fund, but the beauty is that's not a decision that has to be made initially on this piece. It's something that we have time to figure out what the most appropriate location is for a oversight board to oversee this
Okay.
piece.
And then my second question, I probably should have flipped them around, but is the purpose of establishing this is to get a spot to put the revenue versus the operating, versus a line, revenue input to our existing budget? What do we see the value of this?
Yeah, so right now what's happening, right, is we are currently continuing to tax our operating budget for this purpose, and this number is going to continue to grow. We could very well just include this as an override and make sure the number is substantial enough that it essentially generates its own 2.5% each year and continues contributing into it, but then you're looking at, a couple $100,000 just as a base for this to be able to cover the operating budget funds. pulling it out allows it to be separate, allows the town to kind of flex with the requirements, and you know, if there's a good year and the requirements aren't as stringent, then we could reduce back the cost to the individuals.
So maybe the piece that I'm missing, and why couldn't we do an assessment if it was standard budget? As you know, we have tax income, we have water, or does it need to be an enterprise fund for us to make an assessment?
So we currently do assessments, if you think about it, for trash, right? Every single place, every single owner in town, whether you're a business or an individual, gets a trash bill, whether they want one or not, unless they can show that they have a dumpster and they have to go through Board of Health, blah, 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 to get out of it. So we currently already do that. Those who may recall, I actually made the same argument last year that we should actually consider putting that as an enterprise fund, so it self-operates. We're never guessing every year to hope it doesn't go over the amount that we raise on the revenue side. The other thing is, when you're doing things like that, it's always washy. You're not really sure what you're gonna exactly collect, how much the cost is gonna be. So you're hoping that your expenses don't exceed what you just collected for your revenues. Putting the numbers aside, it allows it to self-contain and operate in and of itself.
Yeah, but if it, I think I understand it's just easier for the books, because if we overspend on it, we're gonna have to make transfers. So it really doesn't matter.
Well,
At the
you
end of the
have to
day,
pick
if
it up-
there's. Go ahead.
pick up in the regular budget, as opposed to having the ability to self-contain those figures.
What I'm, I think I'm
think
getting at, I could be wrong, but what I'm getting at is, your statement was, we might be off, right? We might assess $100 and it costs $150. Right?
So think of it this way. Every time, the way we currently do the billing, it makes it very, very challenging to actually figure out how much money we're pulling in on the current month's bill of what we just sent out. We know how much we pull in every month and how much we bill every month, but we don't always have the detailed report to know exactly how much. Like if we bill $100 worth of bills this month for trash, and I collect $100, it is very hard without going through every single account to figure out how much of that $100 was collected from this month's bills and how much of it was from prior months. The reason we don't run into too much difficulty with trash is because we've had so many years of doing this that oftentimes people eventually pay and we're collecting from behind months, and it ends up balancing itself out. This first year will be a lot harder because if you assess people, you don't always collect, and let me restate that, you never will collect 100% of what you assess.
So Heather, when similar questions were posed to the water department, I recall them saying, if there's a surplus of revenue over expenses, they get to keep it. If there's a deficit, of revenues over expenses, they just raise their water fees in the ensuing year. What happens here if that happens? I think to Ben's point, then you come back to the reserve fund and ask the operating fund of which it got pulled from to subsidize its potential deficit, which begs the question, what have we gained by doing this?
So the goal is, Mark, we like to plan things out. We like to understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. So the idea is to actually build a budget for what we need for the MS4, do a cost benefit analysis and some other pieces as well to figure out, Travis doesn't have the staff currently to do this in-house. We don't have the bodies. We either have to expand the staff, or alternatively, we're gonna have to find a way to hire out. So we have to calculate all those costs. Probably beneficial to calculate the cost of having a consultant do the paperwork, put all those numbers together, figure out these exact estimate number of parcels, figure out the collection rate, which is not very good. It's usually around like mid-80s to high 80s percentage collection rate when you're talking about water and trash. So I would imagine this would be no different. And then you figure out and allow for abatements and everything else to come up and calculate the number of what you're looking for. And I think we can do that pretty accurately, even taking into consideration that the numbers might be We might have to be a little more conservative, a little higher for the first year, but then the nice thing is the next year, let's say that there's no additional restrictions and costs don't go up too much for the piece, it allows the rates to kind of stabilize and stay the same, because we have the additional from the year before to offset it.
I'm sorry, I just don't understand. I agree with everything you just said. I just don't understand why you need a special enterprise fund to do that. What's special about this? What does the enterprise fund do to enable you to do that?
So this is a strong recommendation from the state and the other organizations involved to go with an enterprise fund, to have it separate, to be able to deal with it individually. You could do it, we could do it just like we do the trash, but the problem is that you're always sitting there hoping that no one tries to cut the trash budget, right? Because they don't understand something. So you have to wash the two numbers. It's extremely stressful every year we do the trash, trying to make sure that we wash the two numbers. The other thing is, it's not supposed to actually make money where it's in the general fund. So we're not supposed to bring in more money than we expend. So it's that very tight, difficult balance that is not fun to do and is always very strenuous. This reduces that strain and pulls it out, so that's just easier to manage.
Okay.
It's not Paxton sitting here saying we want a creative way to do something different. We want to be the first ones doing it. It is the same thing that a lot of towns are currently doing, and I can, excuse me, I can get the different towns, but Rutland's nearest neighbor who is doing it. Shrewsbury did a very comprehensive one. We can find out the other pieces as well. I'm happy to even do more research before Monday in the event there's additional questions.
No, I think I understand it. It's really a bookkeeping benefit. It allows us to separate it and watch the inputs and the outputs without all the noise of the standard town budget at a very simplified level. So I understand.
Yes, and it also gives the ability, so, let's say that all of a sudden halfway through the year, costs for something go up exponentially, or the state adds in a new caveat or a new requirement that we have to meet that we weren't originally planning on. It gives you the ability that if you needed to raise the rates, you can do it so that you have the funds to meet that, as opposed to the concern, which is if it's part of the operating budget and all of a sudden your expenses randomly go up, now you're in trouble because now you're going to have to pull from other items to balance it at the end of the day.
Just for the record, May town meeting last year, 2023, $14,000 transferred for a ditcher head attachment to clean catch basins. So we just bought it a year ago.
Well, we have the options of making a motion to approve, to disapprove, or to take no action.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion?
On here.
Motion's been made and second. All in favor, I think I need to do it, even though we're all present. Do I have to do it by roll call?
I don't think so.
I think so.
No, you guys are all present. You should be fine, Mark.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes. Right to farm bylaw, Article 3.
Yes.
Two,
So back
by the
in,
way, 2 was not supposed to be the long one or the hard one.
I apologize.
okay.
So let's keep going.
Yeah, so around 2007, town meeting voted to pass a bylaw. It was under a different name, agricultural preservation bylaw, I believe it was. This came up during the process of discussing about zoning bylaws, and at the time, we went to pull it to look at the language of it, found it on the Concom's website, pulled the bylaw, went looking in the town clerk's office to see what the final version was that was sent to the state. After searching records and conferring with the AG's office, we never sent the bylaw to the state, or there's no record of that. So if you don't send a general bylaw to the state, it doesn't actually become law. It's slightly dated, being back in 2007, so it's a little bit late to submit a late submission, so this just cleans things up. The right to farm bylaw proposed is taken from the state's draft version, or their template bylaw. I believe the major modification is just that instead of just having disputes go to the Agricultural Commission or the Select Board, they go to the Agricultural Commission if one exists, and if not, they go to the town administrator.
So Heather, can I say something the same but differently? We thought we had the bylaw, we didn't. We operated under the assumption that we did, and now we're going forward legislatively to make sure we do. Does that sum it up?
Sounds about right.
I'll make a motion to approve
Second.
Article number 3 on the right to farm bylaw.
Okay, is the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. It passes. Article 4, Heather.
This bylaw will never be finalized. We have been amending this bylaw at every town meeting, it seems. So this one is just adding in the local wetlands protection piece so that they can collect fees related to it. It was something that was a best practice. It was raised during a Conservation Commission meeting I was at a number of months ago, and I promised that I would put it forward for the next town meeting that came up. The specific language of it is attached to this. I can scroll down if folks want to see it. It's just in the, what do you call it? Just give me 1 second. Here. I'm scrolling on my side so no one gets dizzy. One moment, I'm almost there.
Your screen's not changing.
Okay. It did now?
No.
Didn't.
There it goes.
Yeah, okay. I just didn't want to scroll it. I was told it makes people dizzy, so.
So Heather, under the special revenue funds, the Conservation Commission has 2 of them. Not unlike the Recreation Commission has several of them. The Recreation Commission is identified, though, as 53E 1/2 fund. How is the conservation proposal here in front of us right now similar to the recreation, different than their revenue fund? What's the clarification?
Sure, so, and I'd say mostly prior to 2016, Recreation, I think even Conservation had specific provisions, as well as some other groups, in the Master General laws that allowed them to have a revolving fund. In 2016, during the Municipal Modernization Act, once that got passed, there was the ability to pretty much have a revolving fund for a multitude of purposes, as long as you created a local bylaw for that, such as what you see here that spells out each of these pieces. So yes, Recreation had another revolving fund. I believe most of those funds are, I want to say, are mostly gone at this point. They've been working them down, but same thing with Conservation. In this case, it's specific to collecting them under the general wetlands bylaw, where we didn't really have a mechanism to collect them after we created the general wetlands bylaw. I believe the other one is under the state wetlands bylaw.
So not to get ahead of myself, but the next article allows them expending $2,500. So is this essentially allowing them to spend their own money that is in their special revenue fund?
So what happens with the revolving fund bylaw is the first step is to actually create the revolving fund bylaw, so it puts the money specifically here. What's happening right now, as I understand it, is the stuff from the local wetlands bylaw piece is going to the local receipts and not going to its own piece. So even though they're collecting it each year, they can't really spend it. This allows them to collect it, hold on to it, and be able to spend for these purposes, services, supplies, part-time wages, other operating expenses, expenses related to enforcement of the local bylaw. So right now they're collecting it, but they can't actually spend it
Right, exactly.
because it goes to the town's piece.
Right.
The whole purpose of having these things is to be able to spend from them for those related purposes. No different than, if you remember, we added recently the planning board one, where they can actually pull in money from permit application fees and in turn be able to pay for consultants, advertising, and planning board related expenses, where prior to that, they just didn't have the ability to actually do any of those things. They were doing interesting things where someone would come in, they would actually hold a flat check for the consultant, give the check that was already written out to the consultant to them, and then ask for more money for them to be able to keep the permit process going. So it's a cleaner way of doing things, and it allows them to hold the funds for the purpose of which they originally are pulling them in.
Yep. All right, thank you.
So I make a motion to approve Article 4.
Second.
There's been a motion made, a second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, abstentions? None, it passes. Article 4 set it up, Article 5 lets them spend $2,500, is that right?
Yes, and the only other addition, you'll see the library. I omitted a 0 at annual town meeting, and they generally spend the 5,000, not the 500. So the town accountant asked me to make the repair.
Make a motion to approve Article 5.
Second.
Been a motion and a second, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None, abstentions? It passes. You are limited to 2 minutes on Article 6 for $2.
That's it. Buck a minute.
So in short, I spoke to the town accountant. At the end of the day, my Excel sheet was off by $2. It had a rounding error. We double checked with the state. They said we absolutely need to fix this. So this is a article for $2, and what we're doing to get everything to balance is just reducing the debt borrowing cost by $2. It's a fund we're not going to utilize, I believe, this year anyway. We're all set, but we're going to reduce that by $2 so that we're all balanced and everyone's happy.
They had a great show about this
Motion
in
to
the 80s.
disapprove.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, okay.
Second.
Any
Squeeze that.
discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Passes as approved. Article 7, Heather.
Sure, so I'm just gonna, if I can, explain 7 and 8 together.
Yep.
So Article 7 and 8 came out of the joint meeting of the working meeting of the select board and the finance committee. I believe it was back in October. Our free cash certified over 600,000 this year. I think everyone recognized the fact that we've been pulling quite a substantial amount from our operating stabilization over the past couple of years to balance our budget, and we wanted to recognize the opportunity to put the funds back there. And then there was debate over whether it should all be in the operating or if we should put some into the capital stabilization, especially in times of really tight budgets, where it would allow for the opportunity to have smaller items necessary from the departments as opposed to the larger ones. And just for follow-up on that, I do have modified numbers, so we ended up being slightly higher than what they should have been. I did check and saw my information sheet, which no one has yet. I'm waiting for the motions, but I did check with the town accountant, and those numbers should actually be $69,138 for each.
So, Heather, you made mention free cash a little over 600,000. Did we lose her?
No, I think she just turned off her camera.
So the actual number was, 638,000, of which decision was made to leave 500,000 for the budget, which left 138,276 to be sent to either the capital depreciation or the general stabilization fund, and that's how dividing those evenly by two leads in Article 7 to 69,000, either 140 or 138, and Article 8 to the general stabilization, operating stabilization fund for the same amount. And it's sponsored by both the Select Board and the Finance Committee on the heels of our discussion at our October 13th joint working session. So that's just a little additional background. So is there, the motion would be to approve or disapprove, but approve Articles 7 and 8 with the slight dollar amount modification?
I'll make a motion to approve Articles 7 and 8 with the 69,138.
So I'm going to do Article 7 separately and then Article 8. That don't mean to correct you, I just think it would be cleaner at special town meeting. So motion's been made on Article 7, second.
Second.
Any discussion? None? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Abstentions? None? Article 7 passes. Ben, you want to go to 8?
I'll make a motion to approve Article 8 for 69,138.
Second?
Second. Any discussion? None? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Passes as approved. Article 9. Heather.
So Article 9 is a citizens petition to amend the special act. So two pieces here, just to make sure everyone understands. The first is a citizens petition. So in Massachusetts, in towns with town meeting, citizens can get together and ask for a specific article to be placed with its very specific outlined language on a town meeting. When you have a special town meeting, that requires at least 100 signatures. And there was over, I want to say, around 130 signatures that were certified for this one. When the Select Board has already called the town meeting, the citizens petition goes on to the town meeting warrant automatically. It's the one thing that kind of bypasses the Select Board's yay or nay when they're setting their town meeting document. And it goes on verbatim as it was written. So that's the first piece, citizens petition. The second piece is the special act. So in 2013, the town has its special act that is essentially its charter that governs the town. That's something we've been talking about a lot, right? Which is the Charter Review Committee to take a look at that. It's been going on for over 10 years, so it's time to make sure everything looks right and we still are happy with everything the way it is. What this citizens petition would do is it would request that the Select Board file with the legislature, usually through our representative, the amendment to the current special act that's on file from 2013, and it would increase the size of the Select Board from 3 members to 5 members.
And I think it's important to note that the Select Board recommended approval.
Yes.
So this is not an us or them or citizens against them. It's just general feeling that in addition to taking a look at the entire town charter, this one in particular to be made.
One question I have is, does it change the amount of members required for quorum?
8.
But it's not
Yes.
up here, so I'm assuming this is the change. It says 5. I would have expected to see something, language that says, I don't know if it's percent written into the bylaw. So the bylaw probably says, if it's 3, probably says 2 required for quorum. Is the expectation that would change with this?
Yeah, so whenever something is silent and it doesn't say what the majority is, to constitute, or what the number is to constitute a quorum, it's always, one more than half, right? So
Okay.
if you make the board go from 3 to 5, then the quorum is 3. What we've done in other, and that's pretty standard for select board, what we've done in smaller committees that aren't, something that's necessarily subject to MGL, we generally say it's one more than 50% of the current seated members, right? So if you have a 7-member committee, but you only have 5 seats filled, then your quorum is only 3.
Okay, just as long as there was a mechanism to move it to 3, I'm fine.
Good question. Is there a motion?
So moved to accept,
Motion to
accept this
approve.
article.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Abstentions? None? It passes. So Heather, I don't know if you have 5 days or 30 minutes to explain Article 10 to us, so.
I think I have less than
was all
50 minutes
litigated on
because
Facebook.
5-0, that's when the NA board starts, so.
Yeah.
What I'd actually like to do, Mark, if it's okay, can I take them out of order and do 11 first?
Yes. No objection, no objection.
That's my biggest.
So Article 11 is the accessory dwelling units. So as many folks are aware, the state has a new law that's going into effect in February that governs accessory dwelling units and essentially overrides local laws and local rules that are currently in place. It will make it so that the primary dwellings with their accessory unit, or for those watching at home, they're not sure what that means, it's kind of like an in-law apartment, what we think of as an in-law apartment.
Wait,
Right now, Paxton requires.
Did we skip
that
over
those-
10?
Yes.
Yeah, we're
I'm
doing
sorry, I
11.
missed that. I
No,
apologize.
no worries.
We were talking about that.
So, right now what Paxton requires is that the main residence be owner occupied. It requires that the accessory unit is actually attached to the main unit. It also requires that it's no more than 25% of the living space of the main residence. And there's also a permitting process, I believe it has to be done every 2 years. With the change of the law, it will actually make it so that the main residence does not have to be owner occupied. The accessory unit does not have to be attached, it can be detached. It will make it so that you cannot do restrictions such as requiring a permit every couple of years. And it also increases the size from that 25% to 50% of the main unit, or 900 square feet, whichever's less. So the purpose of looking at this law and putting something in place is, unlike a lot of towns that only have to do like 1 or 2 tweaks to get their current law to comply, it pretty much throws our entire law out the window and we would have nothing to protect us. We're still allowed to have some restrictions, they just have to be reasonable. So they can be something where there's some kind of site plan review, but ultimately at the end of the day, it has to be approved and can't be denied. There's still the ability that we can put some restrictions and say, hey, we need to take a look at that septic plan, especially because we have no sewer in town, to make sure that you can accommodate an additional unit. So the purpose of redoing this now in advance of the new law going into place in February is so that we have some restrictions in place, and so that we also are still covered for any units that might exceed those size limits, so that we can kind of think ahead of those pieces.
Okay. Wouldn't know what to ask.
Yeah.
So
Make
for
a
the
motion
record, I
to
have no
approve.
questions.
I make a motion to approve Article.
There's a second.
Second?
Any discussion?
No.
None. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. It passes. Heather, before you go to Article 10, The original version of the warrant articles included a third zoning bylaw having to do with the MBTA. Do you care to comment as to why that was, I think it was fully discussed, but the Finance Committee may not be aware why that was pulled?
Yep, absolutely. I was actually going to go into it. So the reason I like to do the ADU piece first is so I can explain what's included in Article 10. So Article 10 has two parts to it. One part is the map and one part is the rest of the zoning bylaw. So when we talk about, in this case, the rest of the zoning bylaw, we're talking about everything else other than the ADU bylaw and other than the originally proposed MBTA bylaw. So the MBTA bylaw was a child of the state where a couple years ago they came out with the MBTA rural adjacent communities and a requirement. So because we border Worcester and Worcester has MBTA or transit, right, buses, trains, so forth, we got grouped into this piece where we're rural and we're adjacent to it. Therefore, they had some requirements about the ability for the town to create zoning, not building, but zoning to increase housing stock that was higher density housing opportunities that may never come to fruition. So we had gone through the process, we had looked at everything on this, we had looked at different sites and so forth, but there were still so many different questions that came up that we didn't have the answers to. Our consultant, CMRPC, didn't have the answer to, and we were even still waiting for the state to get back to us. And as we had expected, this was going to be a very controversial item, and we also knew it was possible that we wouldn't get this necessarily to pass the first time it came up at a town meeting. That being said, we have to have something in place by 2026 December so that we are in compliance. And we know right now that the governor has taken very strict standing in opposition to communities, including pursuing lawsuit, at least against one, who adamantly said they weren't going to comply. So those are the important pieces of the MBTA. We're not pursuing it right now because there's too many questions. We want to make sure we get everything understood. We have all of our pieces in place before we go forward with this. And we're hoping to bring it up at the annual town meeting in May. Did that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just in the
So-
event it's out in the public square and we're asked, we can add a little bit to our answer by virtue of what you just shared with us. Thank you.
Okay, make sure you do it verbatim though. Don't leave out any pieces.
I won't.
So the rest of so Article 10 then, what does it cover? So it covers the two pieces, right? So the rest of the bylaws minus the ADU and minus the new MBTA piece and then the map. So I'd like to talk about the bylaw substance first and then the map. So the bylaw substance itself, a lot of it is adding definitions, cleaning up some of the language, making sure things were compliant, changes, like a lot of the stuff changed the state's definitions of things in marijuana. We did clean up some of the use tables. The use tables kind of say what you can do in certain spaces. So we tried to make it a little more business friendly. So, certain types of businesses like a print shop or kind of like an office space are more by right, as opposed to what they might have had before, which could have been special permit. So trying to open up the door to those pieces. So that was one of the focus. There were a couple other changes periodically there. One of the things we discussed at the 8 o'clock meeting, so if folks have free time and would like to stay tuned, please, at the end of this, sign off this meeting and sign on to the next one. For planning board, one of the things that was heavily discussed was chickens. So at the public hearing, it was discussed that there was a desire to have chickens there, and we originally looked at amending the agricultural use section. Well, it turns out when we talked to legal counsel, that's actually not the correct section to amend. The correct section to amend was the accessory use, because the agriculture use section only applied to commercial farms. So you had had to fall into that section, being a commercial farm, to actually be able to take advantage of that section in the first place. So we do have it revised, so it's written in there, and then further conversations and thoughts, and it'll be discussed a little bit later tonight, is of having a further note where it's essentially allowed as an accessory use for residential, and then with the caveat that there be notice still to the planning board as well as to the Board of Health. So that will come up at the 8 o'clock meeting, but that's a change. Like I said, the rest of the things is moving some of the pieces around. Common driveways are now a thing. It's been something we've been approached on a number of times. Previously, they were not permitted. Now you can have one, essentially up to 2 residents on that piece. There were some other pieces that were cleaned up and some other allowances that were relaxed and consolidated. So that's the substance of the actual bylaw pieces themselves. And then the map piece, we're talking just about the district. So there's currently 3 districts, right? There's the business district, GRA, and GRB. So general residence A, general residence B. If you look at the map that was last approved, there's only a couple business districts. So if you think of the map being red for business, kind of like orange for general resident A, general resident B is yellow. The orange is essentially center of town going all the way down Pleasant Street towards Worcester, and then the red, the business zone, it's a couple spots in the center of town itself, like where Town Hall is, where the bank is for Fidelity and so forth, and then over by the Conti building, going down through the Dunkin' Donuts and the soccer asylum, and that's it. Nothing else is currently zoned for business in town.
Heather, can I
So the car-
Heather, can I interrupt you?
sure.
Is it possible for you to call the map up?
That's a good question.
It's on several laptops here at our meeting, but I think if it were ever,
A little bit.
It's gotta be business.
if it were on the screen, I think it might,
So yeah, so I'm gonna call it up, Mark. I'll call up the current one that's currently in place, and then the current proposed one. That is going to be fixed tonight, because there were a couple notations about errors being in it, and I'd rather not introduce the new one till the board meets on it, or the revised one. So let me just, give me 1 second if you could. Let's see.
And Heather, as you're pulling that up, like Kettlebrook's, isn't that a business, or is that zoned as something different? Because that's not on the map you're showing.
I believe that, I know that's open space. So I don't know, that's a great question. I don't have the answer to that. That's more in depth than my knowledge allows. I've learned quite a bit about zoning and maps and so forth over the past.
Was the question, is that zone business?
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure, but there's no way that, over there. Certainly not in any district, so it might be, it's gotta be open space or something like that, with a special use.
The only thing that proposed changes is from 122 from the. center.
Right, yeah, there's nothing
Well,
anywhere.
I know, but I'm just saying that's not, if there are other spots, if we should show the town, and this is where the businesses are, because you would argue, and we can
Yeah,
get to
that-
that when we get a discussion, there are a lot of people that drive
That-
through that, if
Yep.
people want.
Right.
Sure.
My guess is that dates back to the, I believe, late 80s, early
Yeah,
90s,
yeah.
so that's probably why.
It was right around 80.
What's that?
It was right around 80, I think.
Oh, was it that?
Alright.
Yeah, so.
Are you seeing this map mostly orange in the center?
Yep,
Yeah.
yeah. Orange
You
circle.
see orange with 3 red dots and then a larger red dot?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the current zoning map, right? So if you are not currently in one of those red sections, you're not supposed to have a business. That being said, there's businesses that are grandfathered in, which is fantastic. But if those businesses want to change use or, expand their location or their business, they can't, because they're not actually zoned for business. And again, one of the things that we had talked about, and I know FinCom's talked about it, Economic Development Committee's talked about it, other boards and committees have talked about it, is the desire to have more business in town and at least help in some way with some revenue somehow. you can't currently do that with the map we have. We're not allowing business, right? You can't say we want business, but we don't have any place to put business. So if we had an ice cream parlor come in and they say they want to open a location, unless it's in one of those current red dots, the answer is no.
I didn't think the answer was no. I mean, looking at this chart here, it's a special permit. It's not a no.
Not for everything.
Well, for an ice cream, I'm
Yeah.
picking on an ice cream shop. I don't know what's included, what's,
It is a no.
oh, I
So
thought,
right now, it
Yeah,
could
see.
say special permit, but it's only a special permit if it's in that red spot.
okay, let me
So-
get to the table.
So it's permissible. So anything that's in the current zoning the way it currently is, you can totally do it, but you just have to do it when these red spots. Otherwise, it's not the business zone. So if you look at that use table, the table of uses, there's 3 categories. There's GRA, GRB, and business. So anything that says yes, you can do it in business, either outright yes or special permit, unless you change this map, the only place you're gonna be able to do that in business is if there's red over your location.
Let's see.
If there's not red and it's just orange, then your GRA, and the likelihood is that it's a no
Residentially
to doing the business purpose.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to, like, it says special permit for senior residential development, special permit for, trailers and mobile home, board, there, I mean, it's not all no. Day camper, country hunting, fishing, recreational facility, I'm trying to, so business and services.
You looking for one that's like a yes across the board?
No. My fundamental concern with this, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, is we took a, instead of taking a paintbrush and being strategic about where we think we need to do it, we took a paint roller and just rolled all the way down to the Worcester border. So we're doing 2 changes. We're making modifications to the actual requirements, and we're changing a very large part of town to say, yeah, those are businesses, without understanding what some of these changes might affect.
Heather, can you show the map that speaks to the
Yeah, hang on one second.
Ben's words, not mine, the roller brush?
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm just trying to pull up,
Can I just
my
comment?
red line.
Can I comment on that while
Pull
we're
up
pulling it
the
up?
table.
So I get what you're saying. I think business owners are a little more strategic than
I'm
we
not
give them.
saying a thing, I'm just asking for the map to be.
Oh, yeah.
She's referring to
I'm
my-
just
my
referring to
sta- my
this,
statement.
to Ben's, which I get it. I think there's, business owners aren't, I think there's this perception from the comments I see on Facebook and things like this, that business owners are just like aliens that drop out of the sky and land in houses. And it's I mean, they're strategic, right? They're not gonna, even though you drop the roller down there, people aren't gonna come in and just throw businesses in random houses. I mean, you're likely to see like someone, if anything happens there, I mean, someone has to buy a house, convert it to a business.
Or 3, or buy 3 houses.
Right, or by 3, or whatever they do, like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot that has to happen, and it's not likely to be random, like, whatever happens first, the next thing that happens is likely gonna be somewhat connected to the first thing that happened, and.
Yeah, but by changing the bylaws, you take any checks and balances away. There is no more checks and balances. So if you go and say.
Except for the special permit
No,
designation.
but if it's a business
Yeah.
and we rezone it, there are no more special permits.
No, the-
For certain things, but for things that are listed under here
Right.
as businesses, if all of that gets rezoned, there is no more checks and balances.
Yeah, there is, yeah.
Okay. I see your hand raised, Julia.
So, when you move something to a business zoning district, it doesn't take away the special permit process. So-
Even in the table?
Correct.
If the table
Even
just
in the
says
table.
yes, and
Well,
no
so it
special
says
permit,
yes,
yeah,
Then it's allowed by right.
right.
But if it says SP, it still requires a special permit. So just the mere, I think it's a misinterpretation to say that just the mere fact that something has been
Not much
rezoned to
to
business
see, yes.
removes
Yeah,
the
there is.
requirement and removes any checks and balances for it to be a business. It doesn't. There's still a number of different things that they have to do, especially those that are identified as special permit locations.
Yeah, you're right. There are special permits, but what we're gonna do is everything that is automatically a yes for businesses does not, if you rezone it, it inherits all those approvals. Yeah, I'm not talking about special permits. Special permits will stay special
You mean the
permits.
ones that are just a yes?
But the ones that are just a yes, as if we go from the center of town down to the Worcester line, and somebody says, oh, I want to do this, and it's a yes, it can happen.
It can, but that would require that the person living at that address is willing to sell their home.
Yeah,
To a
well,
business.
that's always, if somebody wants to sell their home, you give someone $1 million, they say, okay, great, thank you. I'll see you later. So my, like I said, my fundamental concern, we need to get more business in. And what we've been told is, it's tough to get a business in. I'm fine with making these changes. The thing that you've coupled it with is, now we are making pretty much every house that has frontage on 122 a business district. That does not seem strategic.
I think the other option, though, you would almost have to assess every property individually, which.
Well, no, pick an area, right? So all our businesses are in
Why
town.
not go to Rutland?
Ex-
Why did we stop at the sign?
Right, I mean, expand
But maybe you
the
would
businesses.
down the road, I know, right? That's, Yeah, but you're gonna find 10 different people with 10 different ways they would do it, and the people
Yeah.
who spent the last year doing it, this is how they did it, and the opportunity to.
I'd like to see how many of those people that did it have a house that's in the red.
Right, but were all the people that have a house in the red, or all the people that are bringing it up now, going to those meetings or informing the process?
Right.
When all the work was being done, that's kind of the time to do it, as opposed to 4 days before you're gonna vote on it. And we have to talk about it now, but to me, I think, I don't picture businesses coming in and just flowing through that, it's probably likely some point in that area, you'll have an anchor and build out from there, and the business owners will, and the people, the whoever wants to sell the house, whoever wants to start the business, that's who's gonna figure out what that is.
Yeah,
So.
the challenge is if you look where that is, you have lots of offshoots of all those streets. So you
Right.
get 2 or 3 of them, next thing you know, your neighborhood that was a neighborhood now is surrounded by businesses, and you now have a house back here.
No, it's, yeah.
And all I'm saying is, be strategic about the zoning. This is not strategic. This literally is going from center of town to 122.
Right. And all I'm saying is, who's gonna be strategic will likely be the homeowner and the business owner who, they're not gonna go, if we were to be strategic right now and say, these would be the best places for businesses to come in, if we went a little broad with that, don't you think the person who wants to start the business is gonna make that decision and say,
Then why don't we just take every main road? If we're gonna do that, 122 to Rutland, do 38 all the way down to Spencer. I just, if your comment is, hey, let the strategic, let the businesses and the homeowners do it, and then give everyone the right.
well, I would say Worcester on the Worcester side makes sense. There's more traffic, there's more accessibility, that makes more.
Well, same
yeah.
thing going from Holden.
Oh,
Not as much, but again, yeah, go ahead, Julie.
sorry.
so-
Mark, I just want to make sure I'm going through the chair for this, but a lot of this was actually addressed at the planning board hearing as to why this area was selected and how it was selected. So, I think I'd encourage you to watch. It's clear that hasn't been watched, so I'd encourage you to watch that planning board hearing, because a lot of this information has been explained. I don't want to, I wasn't involved in doing the zoning bylaw rewrite, so I don't want to misspeak, but I know that Neil did a very nice job of trying to explain all of this, particularly why 122 was selected as opposed to, the other major roads in town. Because 122 is really the funnel down to Worcester, that's likely to get more traffic. When you say this hasn't been strategic, I disagree with that. Knowing Neil on a personal level, he's nothing if not strategic. He definitely took a very close look at all of these, at this location. And there's several other limitations that are going to prevent certain types of businesses from being able to go in these locations. And I don't want to rehash this in a way that's maybe more detailed than it is required for the task at hand. However, you know, you gotta look at frontage, you gotta look at the depth of the parcel. Many businesses require parking. These parcels do not have that kind of space. You're looking at businesses that are gonna be boutique businesses, such as, for example, Dr. Siemens' office here in town, which was a converted house. That's the kind of business that you're gonna see come into these locations. And so I would just ask that you, you know, really, especially before speaking on a public meeting like this and raising concerns that have been addressed, and creating more hysteria around this than is necessary, I would really encourage you to watch that and get that information so that, you know, we can have a good discussion about it, particularly at town meeting.
Yeah, I'll respond to Julia's, 'cause I think she was, the challenge I have, Julia, is we did two changes at once. So we are modifying the whole table that was there. That's exactly what you said. We have actually reduced frontage. We have reduced total areas. We have made fundamental changes to our zoning bylaws as it relates to businesses, in conjunction with increasing the amount of space that could be for businesses. So from a, and so I went through this whole document. So from a strategic standpoint, in my opinion, and that's all it is my opinion, you do one before the other. You make sure that what you're changing from a bylaw standpoint, that you are now changing the way that we operate, what our restrictions are. You do that in a small sample, let people come in and say, is the town happy with this? Are we okay that the frontage went from 50 feet or 100 feet to 30 feet? Are we okay with that? Are we okay with some of the other restrictions on parking, off-street parking? There were changes in all those sections. So the town has not had to deal with that yet from a bylaw standpoint. So that's what I'm addressing. We're changing two things, making it larger area to get businesses, and we're changing all the current, a lot, I shouldn't say all, that's a wrong statement, many of the current bylaws that have been in place.
So let me kind of talk to both of those points. As a way of background, this process, to my knowledge, has been going on for well over a year. I think the people that are doing it would argue it's been going on for more than 2 years, but at least a year. There have been 5 public sessions. I would admit that not a lot of people, they certainly didn't attend them, but I actually viewed the majority of them. There's a grant. This didn't cost the town so far any money. They got a grant to do this. They engaged CMRPC. In my sense is that this has been painfully slow, very deliberate, very thoughtful, very well-meaning, very well-intended, driven by a number of people, not the least of which are the ZBA chair and the planning chair, who have not taken this on like it's the wild, wild west. They've been very deliberate. They've talked about process and still having to protect people from Amazon setting up a distribution center right behind our house. So again, a lot of good work and really good intended work has gone into this to produce a massive, massive document. What we can't lose sight of the fact of is that a picture's worth 1,000 words, and the picture out there with the map of the red streak is very concerning to a lot of people who don't know the things that went in behind to get that. And I think the administrator, the select board, the finance committee, the zoning board, the planning board have got to do a good story and be prepared that there's going to be pushback, because what they're seeing is just the picture. And they're jumping to some conclusions, some very legitimate, some maybe not so much. So I think there's work to be done between now and next Monday. So that doesn't dispute anything anybody said. It just kind of gives a little bit further background as to how we got here. And you're right, maybe some people that are on that strip feel differently than some people that are not on that strip, and I certainly respect that very, very much. But it's not a slam dunk, and it shouldn't be over and out. Too much well-intended good work of something we do need to do shouldn't be lost Monday night at special town meeting. Well, that's my opinion, my 2 cents. Anybody else want
Mark?
to join in? Yep.
Just so, well, real quick, so on the screen, I'm hoping you see the use table. I just want to make sure people understand how to read this. So if you're in the business and services section, the red line is what our suggested changes are, and the black is what was already there. So you'll see right here, for instance, restaurant or similar place for serving food or beverage. You can't do it in the residential. You can do it by special permit only in the business. The problem is that the only place that you can do it that's business are those 3 red dots. So if you want to do it in a house that's not one of those 3 red dots or another location, you can't do it. So it doesn't matter that it's a special permit, it's not the business zone. If it's not business zone, you can't do it. The other thing to keep in mind with going back to the strategic piece, there are a number of reasons that location was chosen. One of which folks need to remember is that we have a lot of businesses that are scattered already on that route. They're not in the business district. So if they want to do anything that improves or furthers or adjusts their current use in any which way, the answer is no. And I know there's a lot of things, for instance, with house on pros and cons and both sides and concerns in every which way. But think about this business. It's been there for a really long time. They want to do repairs. They wanted to expand the building a little bit. I'm sorry, they can't do it because they're not in the business district and it's not zoned for that. So that's the purpose of fixing the map in one way, is to make sure that there's actually business zone to look at, because we think of businesses that are already there. Some of the other auto parts places, the auto, repair shops and so forth is a good example. But those are not actually zoned. They're grandfathered in.
Right.
So by fixing the district and having it go all the way, actually incorporates all of those in so that they can continue. We can support these businesses to hopefully continue having their business in town and grow. The other thing to keep in mind with these locations, right, is that's the area. We didn't just randomly pick a section. We said, hey, these are already the denser locations in town, right? It made a lot of sense to take the current area where it was. The other reason to look at that location is if we were ever to think about potentially trying again with Worcester to see if we could run sewer up. And remember, sewer is usually one of those utilities that a lot of businesses, especially if they're going to be any size that's bigger than the bank or an office space, they generally like sewer. It's not very advantageous to stick in a business if you don't have sewer in it, you have to put in your own septic, would provide for that opportunity. So we did think about all of these pieces when we put this together.
No, I shouldn't, I probably misstated when I said, strategic, it makes a lot of sense. So, and for what you're saying, but we went from a relatively small thing to, and I don't know percentage of town, if you want to pick a number. So what I was more getting at, and again, I don't want to take away from all the work that has been done, and there's a lot of it makes sense. But one way that you could have done it is pick the existing businesses and a few other spots, instead of going every single piece of property on 122 that had frontage. That's probably the more realistic statement, was there are businesses there. There are probably some lots adjacent to them that might make sense, create another business district. But I mean, the way as Mark said, the way the document shows, it's from the Worcester line to the center of town. Almost every location that has frontage is now in the business district. And so what I'm poking at, and look at item 1, right? Item 1 used to be a special permit, right? So no one could get into town without a special permit for a business, even if it was zoned as a business. The new bylaw now takes that away. So now it says is, if you are a business and you fit one, if you're zone business, go ahead. There's no talking to abutters, there's nothing. So that's my concern.
Yeah, so I think the thing to keep in mind here is there's very few occasions where a business is gonna be able to move into a location that they're not gonna have to do anything to the property, right? That they're not gonna have to, pull some kind of permits or something else. Like, there will be oversight, it just makes it a little bit more welcoming, right? One of the things we've been up against for a number of years at the town of Paxton is we tend to have a reputation with contractors in general, as well as businesses, that we are not contractor nor business friendly. And we already have a lot of safeguards in place. I think by relaxing things a little bit more, simply just makes us more likely and more engaging for a potential business to think about us. I mean,
I don't think
like
that
a business
reputation
officer
had anything
being-
to do with a map. Let's be honest, that reputation had nothing to do with how the map was zoned. That reputation had to do with the people that they were doing business with in town. Everybody knows that.
But even if it does, the way to maybe start is make it easier for businesses to get in, but in a more controlled environment. That's all I was saying.
So the other thing you have to be very careful of, and CMRPC warned us on this as well, is you have to be careful not to do spot zoning.
Okay, I don't.
Yeah,
So
Here we go, we got our
and
zoning
that's-
Well, I think that, if I can, yeah, so I think that's a fair point. And I raise this at zoning once in a while. I raised it recently on a request for animals, that there's been 3 different owners and 3 different sets of rules, or what would be accepted for animals. I mean, I do support this. I will say with a caveat, I am not a huge fan ever of changing zoning, that people move into a residential area and now, oops, it's business, peekaboo. So I will support this, but I think that's always a fair concern. And I think it's also, Jeremy raised a fair concern about why this end and not that end. And it's like MBTA. I mean, it's kind of picking winners and losers. And whenever, again, I think that this has been great work. I will support it, but I think that that's always a concern and a fair point raised, and one that should be litigated on Monday night, so to speak, lack of a better term, on Monday night. And remember, any of these items on the town meeting floor can be amended.
So I would hate to say what I'm about to say, but we have a hard close on probably one of the biggest article in front of us since I've been involved in finance. So we can make a motion right now, or one of the motions is that we take it up at town meeting, and we have a meeting at 6:30 on Monday, that evening, to take it up again. I would submit to you that getting a quorum and in the like, and in the environment to have the meeting is sometimes challenging, so I'm inclined to want to do something this evening, but I don't want to rush anybody into making a decision they're not ready to make.
Do we have a hard stop at 8? Is that what you're?
We do.
Oh, okay.
We actually have it a little bit before 8. We really have a hard stop at 7:50.
Oh, okay. I'd recommend we vote on it, but I don't, if people aren't comfortable, want more time.
good.
I'm okay either way,
I-
do that or Monday.
Yeah, I don't think additional time's gonna,
Yeah, nothing's gonna change really
it's
between.
not gonna change.
Is there a motion to approve, disapprove, or take no action?
I'll make a motion, to take no action.
Is there a second? Hearing none. Is there another motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
There's a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of approving, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
2 opposed. Any abstentions? None. Passes 4-2. Approved. Okay, thank you.
2 minutes spare. I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Any discussion? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Abstentions? None. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Like replying like that.
No, that's fine. This is part of.